Hey, welcome to the Cam and Otis Show. We are joined by Greg Silverman, and I'm kind of excited because the marketing world is foreign to me, and I know that you've been leading a company for several years now that does this Monocle. If I remember it, Monigle. Golly, see, I told you I'd mess something up.
We just didn't expect it to be a letter from a G to a C there.
That it's the non-existing dyslexia and all those other excuses I could come up with. Let me just do this. Greg, how you doing, man? Good to see you.
Good to be here. We're all smiling and having a good day. Yeah, no, right now I lead the digital practice at Monigle.
There we go.
We've got a software platform and clients, and I've been in the marketing industry for 25 years, specializing in SaaS, strategy, and analytics.
Well, what is it about marketing I mean, 25 years, having done a career of 25 years in the Army. So 25 years is a good chunk of change. What has kept you in the marketing world that's for 25 years?
Yeah, I think when I started, I was going to school and I went to grad school, and I really liked human behavior. So my degree is in HR, actually, in organizational development, because I grew up with a cast of characters that had lots of unusual behaviors, and I thought I need to understand this if I'm going to make it in this world. And so I started working on human behavior and organizational development and process reengineering, and realized that's tough because you got to have the CEO with you. If you're going to make a wholesale change, the CEO has to be involved. So I tried that for a long time and said maybe that marketing is better because it's still human behavior, but it's a little easier to manage. You don't need such a broad company remit to be successful in it.
Mm.
What kind of a approach do you bring to marketing from that human behavior aspect? Because I quite similar observations, some characters I grew up with, honestly, is what brought me towards like economics. And it's a very similar thing of I was like, okay, behavioral economics, figure out why the hell people do weird things and stuff like that. It was kind of what brought me there. And so I'm interested how you apply that to the marketing aspect.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it, right? I was always trying to figure out what motivated people, why they did a particular thing. And I was using a lot of analytic tools that were kind of saying, hey, the world's complicated, people are rational, they'll make good decisions. And I think if I had done that much longer, I'd have left marketing because I realized people aren't rational, they don't make good decisions, and we got to figure out why they're making that. And so I stumbled into a field of inquiry called complexity science, behavioral economics, this notion that our rationality is bounded. And man, I just got excited because I'd found a way to explain what most people consider to be unexplainable.
I love that because that's one of the things from the entrepreneurial standpoint, but especially looking at marketing. It's like you have this notion of the rational behavior. It's like, okay, well, get the good product out in front of people. They'll make the right choice because you're helping them. And it's like, well, no, they might not understand that you're helping. They might think other things about, and it adds all these layers of complexity that people don't think of all the time. They think they're going to get rational human behavior. It makes me think of I'm blanking on the title. I think it's Misbehaving by Richard Thaler, where he talks about the concept of you have these mythical creatures called econs that can make rational decisions all the time, but the world is not populated with econs. It's populated with these other creatures called humans who make irrational decisions all the freaking time. And that is such a key piece to marketing.
Yeah, and I was just fascinated with the idea that we could model that irrationality. Like there was a pattern to it, there was causes for it, there were things that emerged. And I went down the software path, I went down the analytic path, and actually was able to build a platform where we created a digital twin of a market. So we could see, how Netflix competed with Disney Plus and ESPN Plus, and actually forecast sales or subscriptions in that industry with 1% accuracy weekly.
Wow. And I've got a couple of things that popped in my mind, but it reminds me of I was doing some work, man, 20 plus years ago, in the military doing human behavioral, trying to get out in front of what various leaders might be, crazy decisions they might be making. And one of them, it was literally I think it was a Dungeons and Dragons dice, like the 20-sided dice or something like that for the randomness. But fortunately, you're not using well, I don't know. You've advanced to the computer doing the dice?
We're probably using one synthetically in software, right? I mean, because there are all these conditions and this influences that and that influences this. And it was a completely different way, because most people say, well, if I invest this much money, what will I get out of it? And we were like, well, if you invest and communicate your brand in all these different ways, what behavior is likely to change? And then how will that behavior change lead to sales? So we're really looking at how we influence each other, how we consume information, how the product experience change your perceptions. And it was just a totally different philosophy of how to think about it, how to solve the problem. It was a great product, but the business was a different story.
Yeah, well, I mean, before your time or whatever it was, right? Maybe the marketing.
I was the CEO, so it was probably his fault.
Yeah. Well, there was one other thing you said that I thought was really interesting, and I'd love to hear a little bit more. Was the rationality is bounded? Did I capture that right? Because I thought that was really an interesting phrase. What does that mean?
So it means that we have limits. Like, we have all this information, we have all these options, we have all these choices. But there's no way in the world we could process it. I wrote a book with a couple colleagues about, we called it, I can't remember the name, how consumers behave. And it was about how you bought a birthday cake. And it was all about the journey of a birthday cake. Are you going to make it yourself? You're going to buy it at a store. You're going to have it delivered. And we kind of, fancifully estimated, it was like, for any birthday cake, about 100 million decisions, 100 million options that you could create within a 3-mile radius of your house. Because is it sprinkles, is it chocolate, is vanilla? I mean, it just goes on and on. Yeah. And the reality is, our brains are not ready for that and may never be ready for that. So we have to do what often is called satisficing, or eliminating things by aspect. So it's too far to drive to that bakery. I've just eliminated 10,000 choices. I don't have time to cook a 3-layer cake. I've taken baking off the table. And so we don't evaluate every alternative. We satisfice, and we satisfice based on our expectations, our perceptions of the value our actions will yield. And so we're never really rationalize the econ man you're talking about. We never do that. We don't have time for it, and we don't have capacity to keep it in our brain. But there are rules by which where we make those satisficing choices, and that if you can use enough data and look at the patterns of consumption, you can understand what are the satisficing rules in a particular market. I'll give you an easy one. If you're going to pick a hospital, the first thing you'll find out is is it close enough? Second thing is your doctor, can he go there? And third, do they take your insurance? So you've eliminated all the other hospitals by those aspects. You're not then thinking about, patient care costs, is there a waiting room, and then once you get to that, you can start making those decisions. So there's all kinds of ways to evaluate a market and say, okay, how do people go about satisficing for that? Where do I buy gas? Where do I buy Coca-Cola? And we were able to build a universal model that was able to understand the rules of a marketplace.
That makes me think of another concept I've read about, where it's basically, the idea that you take the birthday cake example, that, we get more efficient with our decision making as you make the decision more, and that the things that people make the worst decisions at and that have the, less likelihood of success is just something that they don't make decisions that often. Do you build that at all into your approach for marketing, of trying to basically build, the choice architecture to make that easier? Is that part of the approach?
That is absolutely a part of the approach. Like, what you'll do to sell a Coca-Cola, since I'm from Georgia and I keep referring to that, and what you'll do to sell a replacement window in your house, those are totally different experiences. Like talk about something you never do, replace your windows. You might do it one time if you somehow stay in your home long enough. So the information there, the risk mitigating marketing and things that you have to put in, the dealer confidence you have to generate, how you find that particular dealer to find the door is much different than buying a bag of Cheetos, right? And now you can know my sins: Diet Coke and a bag
Diet
of
Coke and Cheetos.
yeah. Oh, and puff ones, right? Forget the crunchy. I want the puff, right?
When you're what you're talking about there, as far as like giving them that information, one dilemma, and I full disclosure, I've read about this. I haven't had much time to apply this in my work, but of providing that information to make that choice easier and to help people to make those right choices. I think the phrase that Richard Thaler uses is libertarian paternalism, because it's like you're guiding them, but you're letting them be wrong sometimes still. But the fascinating thing to me is that people aren't going to read all of the marketing. Like there's that other rule of it where it's like, and I don't remember the stat, but it's like 20% of people actually want to read all the information. And so you can bury it in the website, because the 20% of people who actually make the logical decision are going to be the type of person to go find it and read all of that. But when we're talking about, helping people make a better decision, well, then what about that other 80%? And I guess that's kind of what I want to throw over to you. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what's really changed marketing and changed the world, is because we're now buying in ecosystems, right? We're buying things because it comes up in a feed, and we're not even aware we have the problem. It's like, hey, would you like to try a new nutrition bar? Because you're working out and you buy a half dozen, and then you consume them, and then you evaluate whether it was the right thing or not, right? So the entire purchase funnel has changed because we can send out more data faster to more people. And very much, perfect point. No one sees everything you produce. It's impossible. It's just, and so you have to build enough ecosystem touch points for the different journeys that people take, because you have that thoughtful, deliberate econ person who might look at everything, and then you have someone who's like, oh, well, my buddy Tom said it, I trust it. And so you have to have the marketing components, the media rights, the social influencers, the tweets, the blog posts, the SEO and the SEM word, all calibrated to find the audience who's the most valuable to you. And so that the scale of that is what's blowing people away, that it's there. But more importantly is you can't actually execute against it now. Mm-hmm. You can be that specific. You can find an audience. I was talking to a guy named Keith Huffman, who is selling brands for cannabis, and he can't market cannabis because it's against the law.
Yeah. So
how do you market your product when you can't talk about it? He's got to figure out T-shirts. He's got to get bands to wear his apparel. He's got, there's all these different things that have to take place so that people in that ecosystem or in that subculture find the product with enough information to evaluate it, to consume it, and join the subculture that's being built around it, the ecosystem around it. And it's a totally network connected, dynamic situation where, much like this podcast, we all have to give into it to freely, so that we might get something back out of it later.
Wow, that's the level. So one of my other paybacks to all the fun that I had in the Army was I was an ORSA, an operations research, and all I'm seeing is this infinite spreadsheet with ridiculous infinite amount of variables trying to optimize, with the numbers. It is like, oh my gosh, I just getting my head around those variables. How did you, I mean, there's some trial and error, I'm guessing, from growing up in this, but how do you manage that sort of thing? Or really, let me rephrase that. How do you, if you got Joe Blow, and I'll use, because dropped Miss Suzanne's car off to get a brake job, so we'll think Joe the mechanic. How do you tell Joe the mechanic to get the word out that, because there's so much? What would that kind of, they at least do that?
Yeah, at least do that.
Yeah.
And I think you were right to say you're imagining this spreadsheet with all these variables. And I mean, it's huge, right? And it's a factorial combination of things that you can actually consider. So I think the way we solved the marketing problem was not to see it as a marketing problem. We saw it as a human, how do humans make a decision? And therefore, we were able to go maybe one level down and one level simpler to say, like, the way I make a decision is I use the thing or use the product, I talk to friends, or I see an ad that changes my perceptions. So if those are the three like main levers, talking, using, and viewing, right, and they're sensorial, you can add, if you can get that small model to work about how that works and how I compare it to other brands and how other consumers do it, you can make the big one work, because all you're doing is adding more layers to it, more zeros of investment, more product trials. So it was a real kind of, I guess, the term was like reductionist idea. And we had to like look in the mirror and say, we have to give up our egos as marketers and data scientists and say, we don't know what the right answer is, but there has to be an operating principle in this world, because people sell stuff, right? People, and we could know like the initial conditions, what people thought, what the market share was, and we could see the outcomes. So we needed to find a path that explained it. It probably, I don't know, 100 million models, right, that we ran and go, oh, didn't fit, oh, didn't fit, oh, didn't fit. But then all of a sudden we started to find that fit, and the AI and the machine learning helps us as people run through more of those models with us without us having to type it into our spreadsheet, because that's how I started, right? With Lotus 1, 2, 3.
Oh, yeah.
10%, 12%, 15%. It's like, no, you can't, but now all of a sudden that thinking, that human thinking, is being recreated at scale. You don't have to do it. You just tell a system to look between 10% and 20%. It tries every value, and you can get that reduction to the explanatory power faster. We never do it individually. That's why people always said, oh, you only know, you can only know, half of my marketing works. I just don't know which half. And what I'm saying is, no, we now know. We can know how it works. And, that saying that to the marketplace was like the guy invented fire, because I'm sure he got burned at the stake, right?
It's clear that you're approaching this the problem set from the math side, but that you're also sprinkling in what I would usually call like the high level, almost like philosophy that you need to solve a lot of these type of problems. Did you have much resistance in your team or with other people in the group that were resistant to that concept? Because I think the way I've approached this in my work before is it's basically you bring this like low level like mathematics, psychology, like what's literally happening, and then you have this super high level theory, like that's why I say like philosophy almost, because most of the time it's more philosophy than it is theory on anything, and it's like trying to build that bridge. And I found that a lot of people who function in one camp or the other have a little bit of trouble thinking about it from both sides. So how did you deal with that?
Badly, because I didn't see how much resistance there would be, right? Because I was always trying to figure things out. I was always trying to build security and safety for my own mindset by having an ability to, point to a likely outcome, to minimize risk, to avoid difficult circumstances. And I thought, very naively, that being right, understanding the math, and saying it tied to a philosophy would be enough. But you're right. People they couldn't believe it, right? And then we would build a model for some of these largest companies in the world, and then they would get frightened, because now all of a sudden the truth was in the room. And the light was in every dark corner of everyone's performance. And the organizational dynamics that aligned to make that light go away were destroyed us, right? And I got to that probably too late. I'm not sure a small startup like us could have gotten there. We probably should have raised what we raised 8 million for the solution. We probably should have raised 22 for the socialization, right? We probably needed $30 million to get the job done properly, because the hand holding, the reassurance, the job descriptions, the security people needed to make that leap were just beyond the resources of the company. And it was a real thing. We just felt awful because we'd introduce this disruption and didn't have a safety net for people to fall into and say, it's going to be okay. Your job's not going to go away. It's going to get better. But no one could see that. It was so frightening to know how things actually work. And of course, we had a couple companies do it. The whole organization got behind it. The CEO got behind it. And it's fabulous. So they're still using the product, but it wasn't, we didn't get it right. And it was both an operational issue, like getting the data organized and ready, but more importantly, I call it a cultural issue, maybe a socialization issue, to make human beings feel comfortable that the thing they thought they never knew, they did know. And we're just not prepared for it. We're not prepared for that kind of cataclysmic change, a truth, because we wouldn't forecast sales, we would forecast units. And people are like, why are you doing units? We're like, well, units is something that people can see. Pounds of dog food, cans of Coca-Cola, bottles of Vaseline, whatever it was. And we never put a price on it. They're like, oh, the discount here and that, there's all this. We're like, no, we'll just forecast the units, what you can actually count going out a door. And that was like, Kelvin, the absolute fact. And if you could forecast, the absolute fact, all of a sudden everyone's facing the truth, the observable fact. And, in this era now where truth, there's all kinds of ways in which people think about it. I don't want to go there. But it is a context to say in that all of a sudden every month someone's saying, oh, you're going to have 42,000 people come to your park. You're going to have 12 million people sign up. You're going to have 400,000 cancel. That's a frightening thing. And I think it was the biggest thing we missed.
Right? How did you find those early adopters? Because anytime you're doing something that is, everybody's been doing it this way, it's tried and true, and now you come along, not that you were the young whippersnapper at the time, but the young whippersnapper with the great idea saying, hey, look at this. How'd you convince, I guess early adopters into that?
Yeah, no, I was always said, you're either telling the truth or you're the world's greatest salesman. I was like, I'm not the world's greatest salesman. But I was fortunate, like many entrepreneurs, I was part of the marketing industry. I had a reasonably visible role in the analytics world on a kind of a global stage. I had a decent network of people who had worked with me for a decade while I was in analytics. And I saw this opportunity to bring this technology, and I thought I could leverage my network to find that first 50 customers. And so I bet pretty heavy on the equity I'd built and the relationships I knew I had, or at least, and then the relationships that were reinforced by my position. And that's how I did it. And, that I figured I had 3, maybe 5 years to work that network and get it done. And so I was fortunate enough to have built up that and then put it in. But it wasn't advertising, it wasn't PPC, it wasn't trade shows. It was like people talking to people.
Yeah.
You talked some about, getting like your team to buy in on it, that they weren't going to be replaced, that this is going to make their job better. What that makes me think of a lot is different studies around like the effectiveness of marketing and how many billions of dollars are spent on marketing that isn't actually going towards, like, it doesn't actually convert any sales or anything like that. You talked about in the team sense, when you talk about going to these other corporations, did you still get that same pushback, or was it were they a little bit less defensive around it?
No, I may have misstated. My team was all in, but the customer's team resisted it.
Mm.
And we thought if you went in and said, look, you have a $2 billion advertising budget, you can get the same results for 1.8 billion, we wouldn't have a problem. Man, that was not enough. That was not enough. I was like, how big does the savings have to be? How much more efficient is your supply chain if you will know how many units you have to produce within 90% 6 months from now?
Yeah.
None of that business case mattered. Because I thought, well, this is a layup. This is a layup. We're getting the same results for 10% less, 20% less. Everybody's going to want this forever. It's going to be take off like a house of fire. On our board, we had the former CMO of Gillette. He's like, if I had this 20 years ago, I'd have made everyone in the department use it. It didn't matter.
Wow.
It didn't. Being that right didn't matter. It was heartbreaking and confounding at the same time, right? Because I thought, well, of course, it's so inefficient. We know so much is wasted. If you could show that you did it for less, time and time again, week after week, month after month, year after year, they change. We had one major international washer dryer kitchen manufacturer use the system for 4 years, and their earnings per share just went up the entire 4 years. New CMO came in, threw us out the very next day.
Go figure.
And I'm just spitballing a little bit here, talking about like disruptions in the market and that kind of stuff. Do you think that you made too big of an impact? Like you talk about getting like the 10 to 20% savings. Part of me is like, do you think if you came in with like a 1% saving, they would have been like, oh, okay, that's a marginal change. Like it wouldn't have scared them. Do you think that's what it was? Like it was almost like too intimidating because it was like too big of a change?
I should have had you in charge of sales. We'd have done better. I was like, well, yeah, why don't we just say it was 5? I think that was part of our problem was we so believed in just giving the right answer. We never stopped to consider how it would be perceived. And even when we started to do that and work on personas and what their problems were and their career objectives, it was just too big for us. We couldn't, because we were affecting everyone: supply chain, finance, marketing, sales teams, customer service. We couldn't meet every stakeholder. Where we were successful is where we could meet the 20 or 30 people before the project started, interview them and say, on what basis would you accept these results? Privately, in a room, we didn't have the scale for that. And most companies don't have the patience for it either.
Right. I'm hearing what's popping into my mind is the irony of human behavior, that you're doing this model to model the human behavior, but the people you're trying to get to use the model are doing the weird, the unexpected. They're taking the outlier behavior that is, outside the curve, right?
Yeah, and we should have built a model about their behavior. We just didn't know how to do it.
Well, I had a thought, and we've had a couple of other marketers on here. We had my buddy Ira on here just a couple of weeks ago, who does small business digital marketing. But this popped into my head talking with you. Is there an adversarial relationship between sales and marketing? Is it kind of like police and firemen? Is it kind of one of those sort of relationships?
I think so. It might even be more like cop and concierge, right? I mean, I think, and it's not just sales and marketing. It could be marketing and the senior executives. It could be production and finance. You never knew where this visibility was going to trigger or reignite an old flame of a fight, right? Or see, I told you so. I had a CMO going, oh, I love this. It's the greatest thing I've ever seen, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to use it to get money from the CEO. He was raving about it. 2 weeks later, he had someone call back and said, you're fired. And I said, come on, what happened? And he said, well, he realized not only could he use it against the CEO, but the CEO could use it against him, and he didn't want that accountability.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Well, there's some deep, dark behavioral problems right there in an organization.
that was 96% of the behavior we saw.
Mm.
That's
Wow.
what we saw. And it's funny because you would think there's some obligation to serve the firm well. You think that your own craft or maybe your own integrity would be, central to people wanting to adopt it. There's all these things that you thought, and then I started to say, well, what is the human issue that we're missing? And it's my kids are in school, my wife's sick, I got to pay for college, I have a mortgage, my parents need help, I can't take the risk. Because somewhere in the fabric of that relationship between the C-suite and the managers over the last decade, trust was gone. Mm-hmm. They couldn't trust that if I brought the right result in, I wouldn't get blamed for it. And it made me really sad as a person that that's where we were as a kind of a business community. But I think that's the reality. There isn't trust. People are afraid of losing their jobs, and back, until the last couple of years when the labor had more power, people were, come on, that was a scary proposition. So I had every bit of empathy for the fear the solution, revealed. Maybe we should have come in at 5%. I'm kicking myself now. I'll be 80 years old, damn it. But I just didn't. It was too big a fissure, right? Because we had this assault on truth in a sense, and we had this assault on trust, and there's almost no way to get the kind of organizational transformations you needed when those were the dynamics that were on the table.
What's something because I'm hearing a lot of great little leadership nuggets now that you're running Monigle. How do you manage that? Because those things still exist. I mean, that was one of my biggest lessons in life, after leaving the Army was, hey, yeah, we may be friends, but this is business. It was the Godfather sort of thing.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm gonna kill you, but it's business, right? I'm gonna lay you off, fire you, but it's only business. Let's go get a beer, right? How are you handling that in Monigle?
Well, I think we're fortunate at Monigle, and we're probably a tremendous outlier because it is a family business. It was started 50 years ago, and to the family's credit, they've never had a layoff.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, they've never had a layoff, and I had a couple of friends working there, and I'm like, okay, that's the island I guess I'm looking for. I could have gone to something more corporate. I mean, we have contractors, right? But that's the deal with contractors. Mm-hmm. We scale up and scale down, but there's no record, there's no history of letting employees go. So I think it's a rare bird. I don't think you can manage it. I think it's very tough. Other places now, people are less likely now to let people go as quickly, and there's a little more equity for the people working. But I think as an individual, you have to have a set of principles. You have to have your values, regardless of good quality ownership, good quality employees, because things happen, right? And you have to, like, when you draw people in, you have to tell them what the rules are. You have to reinforce those, and you don't have to say them a lot because everyone will see your behavior and know whether you're the goods or not. So it's more like I have my values on a piece of paper and I read them every morning, what I'm going to be. And I can't let the world author my sense of self. And the hardest thing is to maintain that integrity to my values, because I'll say them in an interview. I'll say when I'm interviewing people, I'm like, this is what you're getting. It's not that easy, but I'll be incredibly consistent. And I think as individuals, that's about all we can do. I think that's about all we can do. I think it's all the ownership of Monigle can do. I think it's all the employees can do, but everyone has to do it. And it's the problem is, unless there's no moral rules unless everyone's playing by them.
Yeah. It reminds me a lot of, you'll hear this in, various schools of philosophy, but of just, if you want to fix the world, fix yourself first, focus internally. And I love that because I feel like that's the first real life application I've heard of that like working. Because you generally it's like, look, I fixed myself, and then the world's still burning down and all that kind of stuff. But in Monigle, it seems like you really got that, where you're worrying about yourself, your own values, and carrying that forward. And if you get everyone on that same page, then you can do it as an organization.
That's right. And it's hard. We're a smaller group, but it's still a couple hundred people. That's not nothing, right? That's a lot of people trying to get there. And I think the hardest thing for people to realize in this day and age and I think it's Adam Grant posted this the other day. He said there's stimulus and there's response. And in between those two events is agency, your choice on how you're going to respond. And most people don't want that, responsibility. They want to blame someone else or say it's someone else's fault or the market did this. It isn't. You get to choose what kind of life you want to have. You get to choose what kind of person you want to be, and no one can take your feelings away from you, right? And I worked at Omnicom for a while, and our chairman came in, John Wren, and it was 2007. Everyone's, oh, we're going to have a recession, blah, blah, blah. And what are you going to do, John, about our budgets, reduce them because of the recession? And I've never seen a man get angrier or more composed at the same time. And he just said, do you have 100% market share? Because when you do, you can talk about the economy. Meanwhile, all that's happening is someone's beating you to the punch. Someone's coming up a little bit harder. Someone's working a little bit faster. And you need to accept responsibility until you have 100% market share. When you have it, I'll lower your budget.
Where did this habit that you have with the values and even just understanding values, where or when did you adopt that? Was there influence or what happened there?
I think it was like, some people wake up and, the windows part and the sun rises and they're there. I'm one more who kind of drags the curtain over slowly.
Peek around it a little bit.
That's right. Is this guy? So I was lucky, like I'm sure many people on the show, there were people who stepped into my life and helped me as mentors, whether personally or professionally. I've had love in my life, so I could, I know the richness of that. Some of it I sought out, classes and training and looking for solutions. So it's a little bit of ambition, a lot of luck. The difference between my ability to see all that and someone else's is probably 3 meetings in your lifetime, right? Or 3 people you met or 2.
Yeah.
But I can't say I like engineered it or something, but I saw people's habits. I saw people who espoused values. I saw people who were consistent and had integrity. I thought, oh, that's better. And I want to do that. So I'll just try and get good at it. I'm pretty good at it, but I don't know how good.
How would you kind of playing a hypothetical here, let's say a business of, let's say 50 employees, talking about building those internal values and, that cohesive environment like we were talking about. How would you market that? I guess, looking at it like from an internal marketing standpoint, how would you sell that to a team?
Yeah. So I have a framework just wherever I go, and I would articulate those values pretty early. Right. So if I walked in, like I had a 50-person team when I walked into Monigle, and I said, what are our values? And that was probably for my team a new idea. I mean, the company has values, but teams have to perform and deliver to certain types of clients. And I said, okay, well, does anyone want to brainstorm some values with me? And they're like, no. And I said, okay, then I'm going to give you some. Right. And I went out and listened to customers for a few months and said, what is it that you value from us? What do you want us to be? Because most of the time people wake up and go, I got to do something. And I'm like, no. If we would all take a little time figuring out what we want to be, it'd be a lot easier to do. And then we wouldn't have to say anything about it because our customers would love us so much. So I took those values, and then I took some of the training I have about how you build structure and how you build process and how you build expertise. So for me, it's 4 parts: culture, process, structure, and expertise. And I have frameworks for those. So I just put the values on top that I thought were appropriate for this business setting. And then I have like my own personal method that I've cobbled together from other people. You know, it's agile, it's Frederick Hertzberg, and it's basically never draw an org chart.
How I was back to our sales versus marketing. One of the things I was thinking about, and I've worked with and read several books about this also, and the sales, you know, the great salesman doesn't necessarily become a good sales manager. Is there some similarities in marketing in that sense, where you got that guy that is, man, he understands the whole process and all that, but you put him in charge and it ain't so much.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, especially in the way in which, let's say, marketing's changed in the last 5 years, because most marketing executives, advertising, creative folk were taught and built up on quality execution. Like, that's great creative. You won an award. It's a memorable TV ad. It's a great billboard. And so in their world, what they've come to is that they've been able to build lots of great winning campaigns, and those campaigns probably delivered sales, right? I mean, it wasn't like they weren't good at it. But back to that notion of ecosystem and data and audience mining, I think now putting that kind of creative person at the top has a low probability of a high degree of success if they aren't sensitive to the ones and zeros of the digital age. Maybe they have a good number two, or maybe I see more and more like the number two who can make everything work. They're almost reversing roles. They're getting more power in the organization, and the creative people then can be creative. Mm-hmm. But I don't think you can take a traditional marketer and get them to be wildly successful. I mean, it's always why CMO turnover rates are so high, because the demands analytically are so great. And I think it's not limited to marketing, right? You can go in the grocery store industry, and people who run stores get promoted into advertising positions. And, you know, when you're used to stacking cans, it's hard to jump into an ecosystem world. My dad was a salesman who had a Rolodex, right? He couldn't make it today. I remember he was 73, lost his job and wanted to keep working. I said, "You have a resume?" He said, "Resume, boy. I'll show you." He wrote his name on a piece of paper and a telephone number and faxed it in. Said, "They don't know me. I don't want to work with them." So, you know,
that's awesome. I love it.
I mean, so that there's all these people have grown up. And certainly people we were talking to had those skills to be effective in sales or marketing, but this new requirement, right, where ecosystems are changing purchase cycles so quickly, right? Amazon bought like One Medical, and I don't know if you followed that. Mm-hmm. That's a virtual doctor. Mm-hmm. It's going to be, "Alexa, please call the doctor. I'm in Pennsylvania and my ear hurts." And mm-hmm. that's going to change. You could be the world's greatest hospital administrator, but now you're contending with the likes of Amazon, who has me every day almost buying something. You know, it's going to be Prime Plus. It'll be $14,000 a year, but hey, I will have a doctor, right?
I think so much of this, it runs a lot of a conversation we had with Dr. David Gruder a few weeks ago around the separation inside the C-suite and the strategists and tacticians, and how it's so important to, you know, divide people up by their skill sets. And one of the things that I'm kind of realizing as you're talking about the changes of industry, Greg, is that it's like this attachment to the title, that like this title means I do this job, rather than recognizing like what skill sets make up that job. And then when things change, you know, you go into a new position, then if you're looking at those skill sets, you can look at it pretty easily and say, hey, I'm the best marketer in here, but this is only 60% marketing now, 40% leadership. Gosh, if I'm not a good leader, then I wouldn't be good at that job, type of thing. And like just having that honest reflection of the skill sets versus just like treating the title like some sort of catch-all of what the position is. Because, you know, we always talk about, you know, the sales guy who goes up to sales manager and that kind of stuff. Well, the reality here whenever we go through those stories is that the manager who just has the managing science down and can learn the sales is probably gonna be better as a sales manager than the salesperson. If they're a good manager, then they can communicate with them and, you know, build that feedback loop and all that kind of stuff. But I think just so much of it goes back to recognizing those skill sets versus, like, I mean, titles are so arbitrary inside of businesses anyway. I mean, as far as I'm trying to think who we had on the other day, who's chief. Gosh, they had some C something O title that was
chief of virtual work or chief of customer.
right.
You know, but
what does it really mean though? Like, what's the skill set? Yeah,
you're absolutely right, and I think people are afraid to honestly say what is it that they can do, because what you want to be able to do is be in a position where you can create. Right, you want to create your thing, the thing you're passionate about, and so reaching for layers or in an organization sometimes puts people in the worst possible positions because they think, oh, I've got to get ahead. It's like, no, you want to be creative. You want to live your passion out as best you can. And organizations should be inviting people in to fit to their skill set rather than to fit to the next job.
You know, the Army did that right as I started my career off. The Army used to have, they called specialists. And they still have a rank of specialists. It's like the fourth rank you go to, starting from the very, you know, privates. But we used to have, instead of just being a specialist, it used to be spec 4, 5, 6. And in the career field that I started off as an engineer, equipment operators, think, you know, bulldozers and bucket loaders and things like that. That's all those guys wanted to do was operate. And then the Army got rid of those positions, those rank structure, and made everybody be in charge, and also started the up or out. You know, meaning you can't stay in the, you know, as a buck sergeant for 20 years. You have to continue to get promoted, or we're throwing you out because obviously you're not very good because you're not getting promoted. And
they might have missed something there.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like, I mean, because I had to deal with a couple of guys that were really, really good with, you know, they could make that bucket loader dance. I mean, it could do cartwheels and backflips and all kinds of stuff like that. But then I had to put them in charge of somebody. Woo! Nope, it was not the fit. So it's interesting that's, and I never really thought about it in that way, that it's the same way throughout. I thought it was just kind of a military thing, but it's the same way throughout our culture is, you know, well, I love creating, but I got to get promoted, right?
Yeah, and those two don't always run hand in hand.
No, they don't. Man, what is next? Speaking of creating, what's the next creative thing in the marketing space? Yeah, I'll just leave it open like that.
Yeah, no, I think the general theme is this notion that you're building a network, an ecosystem, a tech platform that enables you to create in your community and invite people to create back in, kind of like what we're doing today, obviously. And that you're almost changing the mindset of business to give first and maybe receive later. No guarantee it's going to come back. You know, because people are looking for, I think, trust and authenticity. It may have been battered and broken and severed, still looking for it. Mm-hmm. So I think the brands that are able to deliver that trust and authenticity through the myriad ways with your personal, your bespoke news feeds and all the different ways that you filter out the world or let it in. If you can find into someone's life with that in an authentic and trustworthy way, you'll win disproportionately. But that's a very hard thing to do because it takes time, takes years and quarters to build that. But when you get it, it's hard for me to let go. I mean, I live off Amazon for a variety of reasons, not the least of which I was stuck in a room for 2 years, and that's all I could do. Right, that's the thing I could do. But now it does so many other things in my life with music and video and healthcare and what's next, right?
Yeah, yeah, because they've developed that trust and it's built.
That's right.
And I mean, because for me, I think of anything that breaks and got to get replaced. It's like you type that into the Amazon search bar, and probably 95% of the time they've got it, which is kind of scary too.
Yeah, that's right. And they know you're going to need it, right? They say, "Oh,
Oh.
you're about to run out of razor blades." I'm like, "Okay," but the point for me is, like, I grew up in small town Georgia. You used to go down to a store, and there'd be the guy who ran the drugstore, the lady who ran the bakery, and you would know them and trust them. You have to recreate that kind of human experience and that human connection in a virtual digital way. And I think we're all figuring out how to do that. I wouldn't say we know how to do it every time, but we know you have to do trial and learn, not trial and error.
That's right.
And
Trial
just
and learn. There you go.
trial and learn. You got to trial and learn and just keep going. And I think over time, if people see your intent is to be of service, you will win. That's been my experience. So I just stay that way. It's a lot easier.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, go ahead, Kim.
I was just going to add, talking about like the human component and how that'll be lasting, in your example of going down to the drugstore, what it had me thinking was, if that guy walked up to you and was like, "Hey, I know you're out of razor blades. Here you go." You probably be like, "Oh my gosh, best service ever." But now they've kind of flipped that. And it's like, now we don't trust them because they know too much. But it's that human component that we would have craved in any other setting.
That's right. I went to my first digital conference maybe 15 years ago, and I was on a panel, and I'm nicer and more gracious now. And they're like, "What do you think of this digital conference?" I said, "Digital's so great. Why are we at a conference?" we need a human connection. We need both. It's not either or. We need both, right? We all crave it. It's how our endorphins get released, how our bodies heal. It's how we, motivate to go forward. And, I just think it's a wonderful time to think in terms of unifying and integrating, even though there's so much atomizing going on. There's still plenty of good that happens every day. There are people who get up and put paint in someone's car, and things that get delivered, and someone makes butter and puts it out on a table at a restaurant. We don't talk enough about all the goodness. We give the bad so much time. And I just, I think if everyone took a little inventory about what they could be grateful every day.
Oh man, there's your thought for the day from the Cam and Otis show is be grateful every day, man. I mean, there's a lot to be said for that. I can't remember where I read it, but I think it may have been Brene Brown. And she was taught it by somebody else. So I can only go one deep on where I got it from. But it was, whenever you have a negative thought, come up with 10 things you're grateful for.
Yeah, that's right.
That's some serious gratefulness if you're coming up with 10.
Yeah, but you can look around. You probably have it in your house. It could be in the books you have, the floor you stand on, food you get to eat every day. And we tend to overlook so much goodness.
Oh yeah, man. Well, for me, I'm going to shift us to what I learned, and I keep going back to it. I get to cheat because I set the rules. It's dad rule, right? Dad rule number one. It's because dad said so. So it's not really a what I learned, but I do love the fact that you're either telling the truth or the world's greatest salesman. I mean, there's so much we could spend another hour just unpacking that little phrase right there, because there's so much to that, and there's so much truth to that. You're either telling the truth or you're the world's greatest salesman. And there's a lot of time I've found that some people are really good at sales, unfortunately. And that's about how deep they go. Yeah, Cam, how about you? What'd you learn? And yours has to be real.
It is. I know. We're talking about the importance of like honest reflection, and I think it's something that we talk about with Tribe and Purpose a lot, of like understanding your purpose, how it aligns with your business's purpose. But I've never really thought about it in terms of like the promotions, that it's like understand your skill set and your passions so that you know what you actually want out of the job, so that you can be happy with where you are. You can still be in touch with the creativity or whatever aspect of it, rather than, you know, moving up the ranks and then losing everything that you enjoyed about it in the first place, because that's not a good way to live. And that all just goes back to that honest reflection of understanding who you are.
Awesome. Greg, how about you? What'd you learn?
I learned I shouldn't feel so alone in being confounded by seeking. You know, everybody's seeking, whether it's in the Army or in knowledge about economics, the problems we have, the different ways in which everyone gets frustrated and thought it would be slightly better, and it isn't. But it's still, you know, moving forward. People are still trying. You're still chopping at the tree, trying to knock it down. And the conversation was just reminded me that, you know, everyone's seeking. We can all be humble in that, but also enjoy the journey, because it's what we've got.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, yep. You know, focus on the outcome, but boy, enjoy your time getting there too, right? I mean, that's
right.
That's what it's all about. Greg, how do folks find you, learn more about what you got going on, learn more about Monigle?
Yeah, so it's Monigle.com is the company. I'm on LinkedIn, Greg Silverman. It's the easiest way. I'm not too deep in social media, but I've got a podcast too called Digitally Enabled. But I'm sure if anyone needs to find me, just Google it, and I'll skip 2 or 3 pages down. You'll find me.
There you go. Just scroll down a few
Keep
pages.
scrolling. There's some guys with a better life than mine, I'm telling you.
That's right. Well, awesome, Greg. This has been great, man. We really appreciate your time today and giving us some great insights into marketing and the process and those thought processes. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was a pleasure to be here, and thanks for the opportunity.
Camden, run us out.
All right. Thank you all for listening to the Cam and Otis Show, and a special thanks to our guest, Greg Silverman, for joining us today. And of course, our sponsor, Tribe and Purpose. Find your tribe, find your purpose. Get started for free today at findyourpurpose.coach. Make sure to follow the Cam and Otis Show on Instagram and Facebook, and please rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening. Videos of the podcast on our YouTube page, and you can always get a full archive of our episodes at thecamandotisshow.buzzsprout.com. Thanks again, and we'll see y'all next time.